This is the podcast overview for week 1, module 1. In this first week, we only have one module to cover. In other weeks, we will likely have 2 or 3. So it just depends on the week, what we have to cover. But I figured I'd ease you guys into the summer session. That being said, the summer session moves very quickly. We cover roughly 15 to 16 weeks of material in just 6 weeks. So about 2 chapters a week, sometimes more. So, I just want to have y'all keep that in mind. Make sure that you're dedicating enough time each week to getting through the material, be that the readings or the videos. Make sure you're leaving enough time for that. But this podcast is meant to just give you an overview of what's coming up. The class is very reading heavy, so you're pretty much reading through the chapters, and then you're interacting with one another in discussion posts, and that's where I get to see how well you've understood the concepts in the chapters and how well you're able to apply those to discussions with one another. So let's go through what is here. I'll always give you a to-do list that looks like this. This week we're covering chapter 1, which is Intro to Health Psychology and Research Methods in Health Psychology. So I give you a little to-do list, a little rundown. All of these things you're going to find below. So we'll go through each one of those. This week you are covering chapter 1 of the main text. You're also covering chapter 1 and the intro of the Longevity Project. So you're going to read the little bitty part of the intro to the book, why was the book written, and then cover chapter 1, which starts to get into the content of the book. And then you're going to read chapter 2. So we're covering sort of why the book was written. It's called the Longevity Project because it looks at the lives of people over the long term. So it takes a group of individuals named the termites because they were first studied by Lewis Terman, and they were studied from birth all the way through until death. And so we'll take a look at how a lot of different personality correlates go along with various health factors over their life course. So let's just jump into what's here. I have the objectives for chapter 1 of Serafino and Smith. If you click on here, I go over each one of these individually to give you a nice overview of what the chapter covers. If you read the chapter and you get through all of these points and you still have questions, please feel free to email me. Or we can set up a Zoom session. I can answer any questions that you have. But you don't need to turn anything in here. These are questions that are meant for you to make sure that you understood the content of the chapter. So after reading the chapter, you should be able to answer these questions. And a lot of students, what they do is they take these objectives and they print them out. And then they type in their own answers maybe beforehand. And that makes a nice little study guide for you as you're preparing for each test. Some of these questions are pretty straightforward, like what is the definition of health? Some are a little bit more complex. What is the illness-wellness continuum? Well, it's kind of a multifaceted question that has different parts, right? So sometimes these objectives might ask you what a model is of something, or what different steps are taken of something. So the good thing about it is you're not going to miss anything. You're going to make sure you cover everything in the chapter by going through these points. But the other thing about it is that you really want to try to, which you do need to know, but how do they all work together? How do all these things relate to one another? What's the big picture for each chapter? It's really important to understand how the concepts relate to one another and work in tandem together. Here are the lecture slides for chapter 1. So if you click on here, I've got additional slides that might help you. You might want to have those next to you actually as you're reading through the chapter. I've created lines or spaces next to each slide that you can jot down some notes on. I've also attached the PDF of chapter 1 of Serafino and Smith. It's an older edition chapter that I posted, but if you don't have your book yet, that'll at least get you started. And I did the same thing with the longevity book. I put the intro and chapter 1 in a PDF. And I just, that'll help you get started this first week. By next week, you must have all your books. You do not want to get behind in this class because you don't have a book. So, use this week wisely. Again, ebook is a great option because you get it right away electronically. This is a video put out by the publishers of the Longevity Project. It's Dr. Friedman and Dr. Martin, and they are talking about why they wrote the book. They're talking about their data set. So they are the ones who are responsible for the data collection of all of the Terman people in the original Terman study. So Lewis Terman started the study, and unfortunately he passed away himself and handed over the data to Dr. Friedman. And they're going to talk a little bit about why it's important, what amazing things came out of this project. It is one of the longest running longitudinal studies that has covered people over their entire life course. So we're able to answer some pretty amazing questions because we're using the same data set of people. They don't change. And then these people have things that happen to them over their life. They get sick, they get ill, they get divorced, they go to war, they get depression. They have all these different life events happen. And then we get to see sort of how it affects their health and their mental health. We get to see how the various people who were studied, how their personalities make a difference on how healthy they are. So it really is a strong case for the correlates of personality and health. And so I love it for that reason. I'm a social personality psychologist, so I love to see how things about us, people, relate to the choices we make, the health habits we form, and various decisions along our life course. So take a look at that video. I think you're going to enjoy just hearing a little bit about the book before you dive in. I posted this on the Start Here menu, but it's here again for you, how to do a discussion board posting. Please do make sure you're looking at this rubric of expectations before you go ahead and try to do those posts. You don't want to be missing anything. And I'll try to be very good about getting you back your feedback on that first posting before the second one's due. So that way, if you did do anything off or wrong, you can correct it and make sure to get the second one, just right. Here are the cite as you write instructions. Again, those are in the Start Here menu too, but you should be citing your sources correctly in APA format. And this is just a one-page document that gives you some samples of how to cite, particularly, if you want to cite your textbook or you want to cite the longevity book or a video that you watched. How would you do that in your writing? Every time you take an idea from a source, you have to cite it. And in psychology, we cite using APA format. So this is your first assignment. It's your first discussion board posting, and it's going to be based on chapter 1 of the main text, are some elements that are going to come into that, but also the introduction, chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the longevity book. You're going to notice that a lot of the questions are specific to the longevity book. That's the bulk of what our discussions are going to be about, but there's many opportunities to also tie in elements from the main text, Serafino and Smith, as you're talking about the other things in the longevity book. So you're going to notice starting in chapter 2 of the longevity book, there's an assessment in each chapter. Sometimes it's in the middle of the chapter, sometimes it's at the beginning, sometimes it's at the end, but it's a short little survey that goes along with each chapter. Chapter 1 does not have a survey. It starts in chapter 2. What you're going to do each time with each chapter is you're going to complete the assessment, the little survey. You're going to score yourself according to the instructions it gives you in the book. You're going to interpret your score. What does that mean? I scored a 30. Okay, well, what does a 30 mean about you? And that's all that information's given in the chapter. And then you're going to answer the below questions that go along with the chapter. So there's kind of 2 parts to every discussion board posting. There's tell us what you scored on the assessment and what does it mean about you, and then answer the questions. This week the questions are, what do we know about personality and health? Why might it be important to study the association between personality and health? And then how is conscientiousness, this is a big 5 personality trait, a good predictor of healthier, longer lives? Okay, so you're going to discover that it was found that if you're a conscientious person, you live a healthier, longer life. Well, why? What did they have to say about that in the longevity book? Please explain it fully and use examples. Okay, so in the longevity book, they talk about the subjects, i.e. the termites, as they call them, the original subjects of the study. They talk about these people. So in every chapter, you're going to get to know John, and Mary and Patricia. There's all these different people you're going to be exposed to, and they're going to come up repeatedly throughout the chapters, and you're going to get to know them. You're going to get to know what they were like, and how they were will show you how it relates to how healthy they were. Okay, so if they were aggressive, or if they were conscientious, or if they were not very studious, how did that affect them in their health and their life choices? So for this first week, it's kind of like getting you, acquainted with the book. If you find any ways to integrate in the Serafino and Smith main chapter into answering these questions, that is a bonus. I really love to see that. That's like a top-notch post. So each week, it's kind of up to you to find ways to integrate in some of what you're reading in the main chapter. So the main chapter of Serafino and Smith this week is an introduction to health psych and how do we conduct research in health psychology. So hint, hint, it's going to talk about longitudinal studies. And guess what? The longevity project is a longitudinal study. So that's a good way for you to integrate in what you read in the Serafino and Smith chapter into, talking here and answering these questions. So if you have any questions for me pertaining to what to do on this first discussion post, please feel free to email me. Let me know. I will respond right back to you. Typically, if you email me after 6, I'm not going to respond till the next morning, okay? So, just keep that in mind. I'm not up till midnight checking emails. I try not to do that. So I will get back to you the next morning. But, as you're going through and you're working through the material, questions are going to pop up, and please let me know what those are if you have them. Other than that, I wish you all the best this first week as we get started into the class.